Hello, kia ora, I'm Philip Duncan. It is Friday the 17th of October. Thank you so much for joining me. Well, this is an extended forecast today because with Labour weekend coming up next weekend, a lot of people have been asking me what the forecast is looking like. Now, at this time of the year with this unsettled pattern we've had, it's a little hard to lock in, but we'll do our best in this extended 10-day outlook. Let's kick off with the Friday the 17th satellite imagery showing the next cold front leaving Australia, thunderstorms and downpours across the southeast for them. But for us, high pressure, long time since we've had that, around the top of the country at the moment, making for lighter winds, drier weather and sunnier skies. We've still got plenty of cloud just south of the country, and that cold front is on the way for the lower South Island. That'll arrive on Saturday morning. Apologies for the glitch there as well. We've been having that a bit lately with the Southern Hemisphere satellite imagery. Here's the air pressure for this evening. So there we go. High pressure smack bang over the top of New Zealand. Been a long time. So that is producing light winds for the North Island. And as you go further down the country, Cook Strait area, and then further through the mountains, you'll feel more of that breeze developing as we go through tonight. And as that cold front out of the southern Tasman Sea moves closer. Also some pretty big storms well south of us down near Antarctica. So between the lows and the highs, we've got another area of somewhat windy weather as we go into the weekend. So here it is on Saturday lunchtime, windy weather through the Southern Alps, moving up the South Island. So it starts tonight in southern areas, moves further up towards central New Zealand by the time we get to lunchtime Saturday, which means those of you along the eastern North Island, not only will it be a bit of a windier nor'wester as the day goes on, but partially subtropical. So it's a pretty warm day, hot day, even in some areas in the eastern part of the North Island, maybe even capturing some parts of the South Island as well. Rain on the west coast, some heavy falls and thunderstorms, similar to what you just saw out of Australia. That moves into the west coast, starts tonight, moves up the west coast slowly as we go through Saturday. And behind all that, the polar boundary comes back in again. That should arrive in Southland and Fiordland in the morning. So a temperature drop coming down there for you after actually a fairly mild day today, Friday. As we go to Sunday, the polar airflow comes in around the South Island. It's not as bad as it looked the other day when it was coming in right up to about Auckland. Now we're seeing it sort of not quite as aggressive, high pressure coming in quickly behind it all, and that means that that colder airflow moves along fairly fast. Windy nor'westers in some parts of the North Island on Sunday, again keeping temperatures up for those of you in the east, and for those of you in the north, subtropical wind coming down for a time. But there is the cold front, not much of one, but that is the cold front moving into the North Island. It's either patchy rain or a few showers. It will weaken as it moves northwards into the higher air pressure zone. West coast rain will start to fall apart, and as you can see, drier skies return to southern areas. So a bit of a changeable Sunday on the way around New Zealand. And by Monday, the high pressure zone in the north still kind of holding firm, quite a large system actually, and that means more subtropical or at least northwesterly winds starting to come back down again across the country, and again windy with the isobars squeezed together. Heavy rain on the west coast. It's in the southern half for the most part, but that's where the heaviest of the rain is, and strong gale force winds through the Southern Alps, maybe coming out into parts of Canterbury and around Cook Strait, as well as the next surge of spring westerlies heads our way. Now there is a bit of change in the weather patterns. It might feel the same, especially if you live in this southern half of the South Island. But what we're seeing when you zoom right out, everything's starting to drop a little southwards. The high pressure zones, the one we've got at the moment, is further southwards. The polar boundary is increasingly dropping southwards. It's still coming up, as you're seeing, but it's not going right up over the top of the country like it was doing. And a similar story in Australia. They're still getting the polar boundary, but it's increasingly sinking southwards. So a bit of a sign that summer is coming. But like I say, if you're in the lower part of the South Island, it will take longer for you to feel it, more so than those at the top of the country, which are definitely noticing a temperature rise. And you'll notice it again next week on Wednesday as this high kind of drifts backwards a little bit. It's expanding right up into the tropics around Fiji. And so that warm airflow comes down and around the North Island. And on top of that, if you don't have the subtropical portion, you've got a windy nor'wester that's coming from out of Australia. So no matter how you slice it and dice it, it's a pretty warm day on Wednesday next week. Now it could be pretty windy, possibly severe gales around New Zealand, and more rain, mostly down in the southern half of the west coast, but some of that spills over into western parts of Otago and into Southland as well. So by the later part of next week, in between two highs once more. The high pressure zone to our northeast, the next one coming through here around Tasmania. And so the low pressure zone in the middle is trying to form, and it does possibly produce an area of low pressure as we go to Thursday of next week. Rain or showers coming into the North Island, dry and windy for the eastern side of the North Island, and in the South Island, the polar boundary, again, trying to move northwards, not really able to do so. So there'll be colder air at the bottom of the South Island, and not overly warm necessarily for the top half of the South Island, with some patchy rain. A low like that, a weak kind of system, and nearly 7 days away, I wouldn't 100% lock that in. So it may just be a front that moves up, or we might see some low pressure in there. It all depends on how close those two highs are. The closer they get, the more it smothers that system apart. And so a week from now, going into the long weekend, this is how it's looking at this stage. Not locked in, but this is what it's looking like. High pressure in the Tasman Sea moving towards us. So with the high in that location, southerly winds around the North Island or south to southwesterlies, the polar boundary coming right up to the central part of the North Island. Not overly wet. There will be showers around. They'll probably slide up the eastern side of the North Island as the high bulldozes that all across. But it could be a cold start going into the weekend. So if you're going camping or tramping, just be aware the first night might be a bit cold. And if you're in the South Island, you could argue it will be wintry, with maybe some frosts higher up, not right down at the low levels, but certainly worth monitoring going into Friday of next week. As we go into the long weekend, 8 days from now, polar air still stuck around the lower part of the South Island. Further northwards, typical kind of west to southwesterlies with high pressure on our doorstep moving in. Top part of New Zealand looks to be the most settled. Eastern areas of the North Island may be the mildest because of the west to northwesterly winds coming over the ranges with high pressure around. So that's a recipe for hot and dry or warm and dry weather going into Saturday. And we go to Sunday, high pressure to our east and to our west. You never know, when you've got two high centres on each side, the winds can oppose and meet, and you get a bit of convergence where it gets a bit cloudy, get a few showers here and there. So that's still to be locked in that far out. But you kind of get the idea of what we're showing you here in the longer range maps, that we are potentially going into a long weekend that isn't looking too bad. And then Monday, Labor Day Monday, I should say, high pressure looks to be over the Chatham Islands, stretching back over much of the North Island. And while low pressure is near the South Island, that might only just lift your temperatures up with a northwesterly wind developing. So we've got a bit of water to go under the bridge yet before we can completely lock in Labor weekend. We'll be much closer to that even on Monday, trying to just work out the high and how long it lingers around for. Before I go, let's have a look at the 10-day upcoming rainfall. So look at the west coast. You'll see the rainfall totals really lifting up there, going over 300 millimetres for the next 10 days. Now the blue you see at the top of the country with the green next to it, only 5 millimetres of rain. So pretty dry for the top of the North Island, pretty dry for the eastern side of the North Island, particularly around northern parts of Hawke's Bay off towards Gisborne, Tairāwhiti, and really all along the eastern coastline. The rainfall numbers are at the lower end of the scale compared to what you're seeing here on the west coast. But it does taper off going into the North Island. So while there is wet weather on the way, it's hopefully at the level that's kind of just the right amount for those of you that rely on it for your daytime or daily living. So there we go. That is the forecast for the next 10 days ahead, covering Labor weekend. Not locked in just yet, but it's probably an optimistic map to be looking at for most of you as we look towards that long weekend. I'll have more details again for you once we reach Monday. Have a great weekend.